These oyster mushrooms aren't the only network that are fueled by coffee, because today I want to explain how I've created a second brain on Notion. What happens when you combine the book Building a Second Brain and Hyperfocus and turn it into your Notion setup? It really helped me leverage my focus, and that's what I'm going to be sharing in this video. But first, I want to ask you, what is the commonality between cooking, writing, and building a second brain? And it's not the guy from Ratatouille. It's that they are all tools. They all help us leverage what we try to do. Imagine your grandpa 300,000 years ago. It wasn't even a human, he was like half ape. Let's call him Charles the caveman, together with his wife Charlotte the cave woman, of course. And every day he came back with some meat on his shoulder, saying, "Okay, wife, I got some meat for you." And they were eating it. But it took a lot of their energy to digest the meat. So after a big explosion from the thunder, they had the fire, they put the meat on the fire, and they learned that by eating cooked meat, they would actually pre-digest their food. And this way their brain got a lot more energy. So it helped them to do something that they were first doing themselves. And then we advanced a little bit in time, and we realized that we can also trade these pieces of meat, but we had to keep track of who owes what to who. We started to realize, wait a second, if I just carve down some lines in the bark or in the paper, I don't have to remember all of this. So again, we are using tools, we are externalizing something, we are making something else that does it for us so that we don't have to do it anymore. And there's one quote that comes to mind, which is, "A civilization advances to its level of automation." And this really stood out to me because, like, every time we want something, we try to create tools that do it for us. It can be a bit dangerous because it all sounds really beautiful, like let's automate everything, but you know, maybe you've seen WALL-E, and we might end up like these big, large people just being driven around in some kind of spaceship. Smoothies are being fed to us, we are constantly watching television. So this is like the kind of dystopian doomsday, but also kind of utopian, but not really type of scenario where everything is automated. There's a downside to automation, because you've probably received an email where someone automatically responds and tells you like, "Hey, thanks for emailing, I will get back to you as soon as possible." And you can feel that there's some soul missing. So the rule with automation is also that automation creates alienation. So it's really important to think about, like, what do we want to automate and which parts do we still want to, keep human. But anyway, this was the disclaimer. Let's start talking about the Notion setup and building a second brain. After I finished reading How to Build a Second Brain by Tiago Forte, I also started reading another book called Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey. And the main point of Hyperfocus that he keeps talking about is the thing called our attentional space. You can imagine it as like this circle of attention where everything right now that you're experiencing is happening inside of this circle of attention. And maybe you're just watching this video and the whole circle is consumed by me talking to you, but maybe you're also trying to text a friend and you're thinking about what to eat for dinner. So it just has a limited capacity. An example of this is that it would be really easy, of course, if you're walking and you're listening to a podcast, because walking is automated mostly because it's already easy, you've learned how to do this. So you could give your full attention to the podcast. And on the other side of the attentional space spectrum, we could say that imagine trying to quiet a crying baby while friendly declining a Jehovah's Witness and also texting a friend about how to spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and also driving a car at the same time. All these things just don't fit into your attentional space. So there are constantly things going in and out of your attentional space. Maybe you're trying to read something, people are talking in the background. You have to filter all of them out. And they also found that there's this thing called attentional residue, which means that every time you're switching a task, some of the information from your last task is still somewhere floating around in this attentional space, and you keep going back to it, especially if it's a problem that you didn't solve yet. You will notice from now on that every time you have a problem, it will just keep popping up. It's like this thought loop that didn't close, so they will keep coming. And I will also be talking about this more in one of the next videos about meditation, where I did a 60-day, 60-hour meditation challenge, and thought loops are a really big part of this. So remember, attentional space, your working memory. This is what enables you to focus on stuff. And you want to keep it clean, you want to keep it filled with the thing that you want to do and not many things at the same time. So now let's get to building a second brain, how I've set this up, because there are many lessons to take from this book by Tiago Forte, but these are the ones that stood out to me and that I'm still using, and they provided a lot of value. One of the main things that you could start with is grab everything, all your files in your computer, move all of them to the archive. You know, first you will feel a lot of resistance, but it will really just clean and start off with a blank slate. It's great. Trust me, it's great. So after you've cleaned up your files or you've cleaned up your notes, it's really useful to start with a home page. And what I did on this home page was I created 4 parts, which is called PARA, which stands for projects, areas, resources, and archive. And they are also structured in a way that projects are the most relevant currently, and the archive is the least relevant currently. And there's this gradient. So areas are a little bit less relevant than projects, and then we have resources a little bit less relevant than areas, and so on. And it's really important also to remember that it's a dynamic thing, like your brain, it's constantly changing. So what I really like about this is that it's easy to keep it clean. Maybe you're working on like 6 or 10 different projects. You can just have them in your project, and once they're done, you can just move them to archive, and then it's all clean, but you can still revisit them, so no worries. And one other thing that Tiago Forte mentions is that it's good to always keep about like 5 or 6 to 12 problems written down in your second brain, because these are the things that you will be working on. You will always be thinking, you will always, even when you're like driving a car or you're on your bike or your public transport or you're walking around, you cannot help it but just to wander your mind, as long as you're not on your phone. And ideas will pop up, and every once in a while, when you just make the right connection, something will click, and one of these 12 problems that you have might just be solved a little bit more. This is what Tiago calls doing the heavy lifting up front, because very often we sit down, we try to brainstorm, and it just doesn't really happen at that moment. But what if you could just say, okay, this is going to be one of the 12 things I'm going to be thinking about. Now, during the day or during the week, you will find yourself having answers or ideas about this. Just write them down quickly, and then once you start to do your brainstorm, you will already have a big list of all the things that could possibly inspire you or help you solve this problem. So that's really powerful. And then the next thing, I didn't even know that there was a word for it, but he calls this progressive summarization, which means that if you have a big text and you're reading over it, the first time you're reading over it, you might want to just bold some text that, you know, stand out to you. And then after you've done that, you're going to read the bold text, you're going to highlight it. And then, so it's progressive, that's why it's called progressive summarization. And then after that, what I do is the most important things I'm going to make a call out. So this is something you can do on Notion by typing / and then call, and then it just tells you like, hey, do you want to turn this into a call out? And you turn it into a call out. And then every time you revisit this maybe book summary or summary of like a presentation, you just have to scroll over it and it will easily like become visible what's the most important thing. He also gives the tip of just making a very short summary at the top of what the text is about. I don't do this, but it could help you. And then now the most important thing, what happens when you combine Hyperfocus and building a second brain together? You just, like cooking or like writing, we externalize, we create a tool, we create an external working memory, an external attentional space. So this is what it looks like for me. On the home page, I've written down chunk with a big flame next to it. And a chunk basically means the smallest part that you can, you know, wrap your mind around, that you can consume. I think Sam Ovens also talks about chunking, because there was this guy in the Guinness Book of Records who ate a whole plane. And the way he did this, obviously, was just bit by bit. You can eat a whole plane, and that's also how you can finish massive projects. Just write down what's the smallest thing you can do right now. One really important thing on this homepage is to keep it clean, because there will always be things in the periphery, like you will want to write down like your to-do list and some notes that you're taking on the project. But for me at least, they can be really distracting because your mind is gonna go off all kinds of tangents. And it really helps, this is a big tip, to always keep it visible. Like, less screens is not always better. If you constantly have the most important thing in your vision, you'll be reminded constantly, and like it's gonna help you be less distracted, because you're gonna be looking around, you're gonna see, all right, this is what I have to do, you're gonna do it. And then under this part you will have your to-do list out of view. So once you've finished your chunk, you can just add a new chunk. And the fun thing is that you can also do this for different projects. And I could also go to another project page and I would have the same clean layout with just the chunk that I have to be doing right now. And the good thing about this is that it kind of replaces your Hemingway bridge. And I've talked about this before. It is also something that Tiago Forte mentions, where Hemingway used to stop writing at the moment where he knew what he was going to write. Because if he would come back after a break, he would automatically pick up, and like it would be really easy to get into the flow again. But now with this chunk, you also know what you're gonna be doing, so it will be way easier to pick up your work again, instead of like kind of wandering around like, what was I actually doing again? So I hope this really helps. Just keep it visible and keep it clean. That's the most important part. I hope that this created more structure in your life. If you're interested in this theme of structure versus chaos, then I could really recommend watching this video. And thanks for watching. I will see you in another video.